It had been 15 years since I was last there, and it was time for me to finally make my return. Hi, I'm Bob Seversal. I'm going on a trip to San Francisco and Yosemite. Let's have some fun. I started off my trip by taking transit early in the morning to SeaTac Airport. This was the first time that I traveled since coming out with autism and ADHD, and I paid a lot of attention to managing overstimulation, like listening to music with bone induction headphones to deal with the cacophony of overlapping announcements at the airport, booking a window seat because it calms me to be able to look outside during the flight, and taking naps to both pass the time and recharge my energy. Once I had landed at San Francisco International Airport, I had some extra time before my hotel check-in, so I headed to the ferry building in downtown San Francisco. For lunch, I went to the Mission and then went on a walk through the neighborhood. Finally checking into my hotel, I took a 2-hour nap, then headed out to see the painted ladies and watch the sunset. For dinner, I visited Chinatown and enjoyed delicious food and a treat. After spending my first night in San Francisco, early the next morning I was already heading to the next destination, Yosemite National Park. To get there, my plan was to use a combination of an Amtrak connecting bus to Emeryville, taking an Amtrak train to Merced, and then using a Yarts bus to get into the park. The bus ride was short, and it was my first time crossing the Bay Bridge. Switching to the train, because it was so early in the morning, I nearly had an entire train car to myself. Riding the Amtrak Gold Runner, formerly called the San Joaquins, was pleasant, as the views changed from the waters of San Pablo Bay to the farmland of the Central Valley. Arriving at the Merced train station, I had a dilemma. I didn't realize until the night before that I needed to purchase a transit ticket for the bus service leading from the station. When I did, I was unable to get a ticket for the bus scheduled to arrive in the next hour after the train, so I was expecting to have to wait an extra 4 hours in Merced to catch the next bus. Luckily, with the help of the wonderful lady at the Amtrak station who relayed my call with the transit service, I was able to talk with the bus driver and get a seat on the earlier bus. The last leg of my trip into Yosemite National Park was riding the Route 140 bus operated by YARTS, or Yosemite Area Regional Transportation System. It was making 6 trips per day between Merced and Yosemite National Park, taking about 3 hours. I enjoyed the scenery changes, from city to grassland, dry forest, mountains, and eventually the Yosemite Valley and Yosemite National Park. After arriving at Curry Village, eating some lunch, and checking in, I took a nap. Rested and refreshed, I went on a hike first to Yosemite Falls. I was in awe of how massive the landforms surrounding the valley were, like I was in a whole different world. I experienced Lower Yosemite Falls up close and personal, and it felt like I was in a rainstorm. What a beautiful place. Waking up in Yosemite, I set off on a hike to see Vernal Fall. At first, I hiked on the John Muir Trail, which runs along the Merced River. After crossing the Vernal Fall footbridge, I switched to the Mist Trail, which lived up to its name as I approached Vernal Fall. Vernal Fall was beautiful, with its waterfall creating a continuous cloud of mist that formed pretty rainbows. The Mist Trail to Nevada Fall was closed, so I turned around after reaching the Silver Apron footbridge and headed back past Clark Point. I gotta be honest, during my stay, I found the food options to be pretty bad in the park. This was the saddest grilled cheese sandwich I've ever had. It wasn't even grilled. I really enjoyed being able to use Yosemite National Park's free shuttle buses, which ran somewhat frequently in 2 loops around the park, and stopped at many trailheads and lodging areas. After a shower and a nap, I hiked around parts of the Valley Loop Trail that featured stunning views of El Capitan. I will never forget the majesty of the giant landforms surrounding Yosemite Valley. I woke up early to do one last hike during my stay in Yosemite, a trip to Mirror Lake. While walking near my campground, I saw a bear for the first time on a hike, luckily far off in the distance. Mirror Lake is a section of Tenaya Creek, which is usually visible only during spring and early summer due to snow melt, as it's dry throughout most of the year. I enjoyed the serene environment as I observed some of the local wildlife. I gave myself just barely enough time to get back, take a shower, and check out of my tent. This hot dog was the best thing I ate at the park. It was good. I decided to take a loop around the park on the shuttle bus one last time, and again I took a risk with time, making it back to the Yart's bus stop with minutes to spare. After riding the Yart's bus back to Merced, I got on a fully packed Amtrak train that was honestly a bit much for me, with the crowding, talkative fellow passengers, and a seatmate who had to confirm to their friend on their video call that no, I was not whichever person they thought I was who has red hair. I don't have red hair. Things calmed down as most of the crowd got off after a few stops, and I had some time to myself again to enjoy the evening scenery. Arriving back in San Francisco at night, I was tired, so I checked into my Airbnb, grabbed some dinner, and got some rest. My first destination was Alcatraz Island, a place I had missed out on during my first trip to San Francisco because I didn't order a ticket early enough in advance. Plus, I had never been on a ferry in San Francisco Bay. My interest in going to Alcatraz was more about visiting the site where indigenous activists occupied the island during the 1960s and 1970s. These occupations inspired other indigenous people, including Bernie Whitebear and the United Indians of all tribes in Seattle, and led to an attempted occupation of Fort Lawton and eventually construction of the Daybreak Star Indian Cultural Center. I enjoyed seeing the multiple exhibits on the Alcatraz occupations. I also enjoyed walking around outside and seeing how nature has started to take back the island. I wasn't really interested in the prison part of the visit, but I did take the audio tour to hear stories about when the prison was active. And stepping into the prison cells gave me a better visual of what life was like for prisoners. Trying to take the ferry back to the mainland, I don't know what it was, but there were a million flies all around the ferry waiting area that were just attacking everyone while we stood there in line for a half hour. It was not a pleasant experience. Noticing that the Golden Gate Bridge was fully visible in the distance with no fog whatsoever, I decided to skip my intended afternoon nap so I could get my rental bike. I went to Bike and Roll, the exact same place where I rented a bike 15 years prior, though the location had moved to another block. Making it to the Golden Gate Bridge, I loved my ride across it. Since it was a weekend day, it was super busy with cyclists riding both ways, almost like I was in a race. The last time I was in San Francisco, I never was able to see the whole bridge at once, as it was mostly shrouded in fog, so I was really happy to finally see it in full. I then made it over to the car-free segment of the Great Highway, next to the beach. I absolutely enjoyed riding on the Great Highway, and I really appreciate the advocacy and work that people did to turn this into such a wonderful place to walk, bike, and roll. I made my way back through Golden Gate Park and did some riding on the Wiggle before reaching my Airbnb. After a shower and nap, I went back out for dinner, some walking around the neighborhood, and getting supplies for my upcoming big ride. I had trouble getting myself out of bed and going in the morning, but eventually I was out and about on my bike. My goal was to bike to every station on the Bay Area Rapid Transit's Red Line from Millbrae to Richmond. I needed to get back to Fisherman's Wharf by a certain time that afternoon to return my bike rental, so the challenge was on. Biking to every train station on a transit line has become a favorite obsession of mine, and I have made videos of this for many transit lines, including every line on the DC Metro, Sound Transit in Seattle, Vancouver's SkyTrain Expo line, and Tokyo's Yamanote line. For me, it's a fun challenge to figure out a usable biking route that connects each and every station, and from there, I just need to bike it and film it while dealing with any detours or other situations that may pop up along the way. My original plan was to ride to the ferry and take that across the bay to Oakland, but I was running late, so I made the decision to take the BART train instead. One thing I like about biking to every station on a transit line is that I get to experience neighborhoods that I would otherwise never visit. Passing through Berkeley, I had to take a slight detour because there was a road cycling race happening on one segment of my route. I kept a close eye on the time as I passed through the city of El Cerrito, as I was nearly done, but I still needed time to make it back on the train to San Francisco. I finished the ride as I reached Richmond Station, the north terminus of the BART Red Line, at least when I rode this route, and I went straight to the train platform. After taking the BART to the Embarcadero station, time was short, so I rushed to the bike shop to return my rental. I managed to make it with about 10 minutes to spare. That was a close call. I had one last evening to spend in San Francisco, and I was craving pizza, so I walked to a pizzeria, sat down at a local park, and people watched while I ate my pizza before enjoying some ice cream on my walk back. That morning, I checked out of my Airbnb, got some breakfast, and headed towards the streetcar stop for the last leg of my trip. As I headed back to the airport, I thought about my trip to San Francisco 15 years prior. It was my first ever vacation that I could afford to go on as an adult, and I remember feeling overwhelmed and honestly scared to be in a completely new city to me. Over the years, I have become more confident and understand better how to manage my energy while traveling. And I'm really proud of myself for being able to try some new experiences that I didn't think I was capable of back then. Thank you for joining me on my trip to San Francisco and Yosemite National Park. To be honest, I'm really glad I did this trip, and hopefully it won't be another 15 years before I return. If you want to see more of my content, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.